Hello and a very warm welcome to all the participants today. We have assembled today for a panel discussion on policy and regulations, specifically regard to policy as an enabler uh, for the digital connectivity to thrive in India. Now, India has seen rapid growth, through rapid proliferation of technologies over the last 2 decades. As we embark on a new decade that will bring in new technologies like cloud, IoT, and 5G, it's important that the policies remain progressive and forward-looking. This will allow the digital connectivity not only to thrive, but also make sure that all stakeholders of the economy get benefited and make sure that we have affordable connectivity available to the masses and all sections of the society. Today, I'd like to welcome our esteemed panelists from various walks of both the industry as well as the regulators. Start We'll start with Mr. Ranjan Rao, who happens to be the Joint Secretary for Telecommunications under the Ministry of Communications, Government of India. We also have Shri Raghunandan, who is the Secretary of the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. We are joined from overseas by Mrs. Jeanette Whyte, who is the Head of Public Policy for APAC region for GSMA. We have Monica Desai, Director of Public Policy at Meta. We have Mr. Amit Marwah, Head of Marketing Communications and Corporate Relations at Nokia. We are further joined by Mr. Tarun Chitkara, who is the VP of Regulatory Affairs at Bharti Airtel. Mr. Saigal, VP and Head of Strategic Initiatives and Regulatory Policy and Research at Reliance Jio. And last but not the least, Anjali, who is the Senior Vice President for Regulatory and Corporate Affairs at Vodafone Idea Limited. With this, I think we have a very, very experienced panel comprising of industry veterans and policymakers all together. And we hope to discuss some of the various issues and forward-looking items that could help enhance the growth of connectivity in India and make sure that the objectives that are set out in our goals as a country are definitely met. I'd like to start with Jeanette Whyte. And Jeanette, the first question to you is essentially that what do you think are the key aspects for telecommunications sector for which policy and regulation need to be revised or amended in order to streamline the implementation of next generation networks in India? You have seen a lot of this happening across the globe. And what advice would you have for the policymakers in India?
Thanks, Rahul, and thank you, India Mobile Congress, for your kind invitation to participate in this panel. I think, one of the things I'd like to just really start off with is to say, the recent announcements of series of reforms in India have been a really a game changer for the both digital and wider economy. And we see these as a first critical step for the government to build on and ensure the long-term sustainability of the sector, enabling 5G to lead India's path to as we hear, a 5 trillion economy. So when you said about what are looking around the globe, what I've tried to do is to see what's happening in other economies and apply that to what I think are important for India to become a 5G leader, seeing as we're looking at that as the next step. So I've got a series of suggestions and policies based on our experience. So the first one I'd like to say is to fulfill the potential of this market, we see an opportunity for India to award technology neutral 5G licenses. This will enable India to enter the global 5G technology race, paving the way for enterprises to address opportunities domestically and internationally, and for consumers to enjoy improved performance and reliability in urban and rural areas. The second thing I'd like to say is the timely assignment of spectrum, both for access and backhaul. My third area would say is setting reserve prices for spectrum at affordable levels to incentivize investments. Fourthly, develop a full spectrum roadmap for the future. And I can talk a little bit about the roadmap later, but I'll just say that there's a need for a roadmap. And then this, I would say, adoption and application of policies to facilitate infrastructure deployment. Although India has adopted policies to ease the deployment of rights of network infrastructure, effective implementation is perhaps yet to be seen. Rights of way represent one of the main challenges in rolling out network infrastructure. And furthermore, I'd like to sort of mention about small cells are growing in importance in the deployment of 4G and 5G. So we see something that would be very important for India as well. 6, I would say that creating a safe and trustworthy online environment is very important. Data privacy regulations are crucial, and we know that that's currently going through Parliament this year, so that data flows, including personal data, can be safeguarded, but also allow cross-border data flows so that India can participate regionally and at a global level. And then my final point that we've looked at and we've seen across markets where they've really flourished is a holistic whole-of-government approach. Has the potential to speed up digitization and adoption of new technologies in India more efficiently. A whole-of-government approach, we believe, could more effectively harness the capabilities of intelligent mobile connectivity by removing barriers caused by siloed effects from different ministries. So I've given you 7 quick points there. I know we were very short on time, but we see those as being, generally from across the globe, something that would be, good for India.
Absolutely, Janet. Very, very relevant pointers here. Just put in some of those here. And since you especially talked about the spectrum roadmap and the technology neutral spectrum, and specifically around spectrum with 5G on the anvil, what are your key expectations around the frequency bands, the pricing, and the standards?
Yeah. So for the full potential of 5G, spectrum is needed across low, mid, and high bands. And the 3.5 gigahertz range is really proving to be the launching point of 5G. As of last summer, around 80% of 5G launches had been carried out in mid-band spectrum, mainly between the 3.3 and 4.2 gigahertz. But after assigning, and this is why I say a spectrum roadmap's needed, it's not just about today, we have to look to the future. So we see that there needs to be an expansion, and what we're seeing where regulators across the globe are going is they're either moving up to 4.0 or 4.2 gigahertz if they've not got enough in the mid-band, or they're even looking elsewhere, which often means 6 gigahertz. And as I mentioned, looking to the future is really important. So the GSMA has recently published a report looking at mid-band spectrum needs. And that's across the globe. We looked at this, and on average, we find that a total of 2 gigahertz of mid-band spectrum will be needed. And this figure remains relatively stable across a wide range of countries, whether it's a developed country or a developing country. So we're looking in the period about 2030, that's the amount of spectrum that we think we'll need to see, and also access to millimeter wave spectrum. This will improve network quality, allow all consumers to access 5G, and enable a more efficient and environmentally sustainable development. And as we know, helping Indian operators to reduce their carbon footprint and meet their emission targets. So that's it very briefly, but that's in a nutshell what I'd like to say on the spectrum roadmap.
Very, very well put, Janet. So I'll move to Monica now. So Monica, given your role at the FCC and your current role at Meta, where you look at connectivity across the globe. So what are your thoughts and what do you think is a best practice in terms of global spectrum allocations? And what do you believe could be something that could be replicated in the Indian context?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to join this panel. It's a real privilege to be on this panel with such esteemed policymakers and policy professionals. As you mentioned, prior to joining Meta, I worked at the United States Federal Communications Commission for 11 years. So I really have an appreciation for the challenges that those of you who are policymakers and regulators face as you work to develop policy and rules to improve connectivity and grow the digital economy. And I also have an appreciation as well for the importance of every member of the ecosystem, including mobile operators and manufacturers, in achieving our collective goals. And the importance of connectivity has never been more clear, with COVID-19 having upended the lives of people in every corner of the globe. We see those who can access high quality internet are able to work, study, and stay connected to friends and family remotely, in stark contrast to the more than 3.5 billion people around the world who still are not connected. So addressing barriers to connectivity requires many people working together across public and private sectors. Of course, robust broadband deployment supporting quality internet access is foundational for taking advantage of new and innovative technologies and why incentives to stimulate broadband, stimulate deployment of 5G networks are critical, as Jeanette mentioned as well, in maximizing the potential for strong digital economy. Because spectrum is such a key component for connectivity, we believe that a few principles are important to embrace. First, it's fundamentally important to have an abundant supply of spectrum in order to reduce service provider barriers to entry and increase competition and innovation. We recommend, as Jeanette did, identifying additional spectrum to be made available in low, middle, and high frequency bands. And also achieving an abundant supply requires periodically evaluating spectrum allocations to make sure spectrum really is being well utilized. Second, we strongly believe a balance of both licensed and unlicensed spectrum is necessary, as we support both. Licensed spectrum is necessary to promote build out of large, densely populated areas while facilitating global roaming and leads to economies of scale for chipsets and devices, while unlicensed spectrum drives innovation and investment in a range of technologies like Wi-Fi that can complement 5G and expand broadband access at low cost and allow for applications that in turn further stimulate demand for broadband. Third, we think it's important to promote flexible use and spectrum sharing across users and platforms wherever that's feasible. It's really going to take a mix of technical solutions to reach the world's unconnected, which is why sharing across users and platforms such as mobile, satellite, and new technologies is important for increasing the spectrum available for broadband. And fourth, it's important to pay attention to network coverage in addition to capacity. Regulations can incentivize expansion of coverage to unserved and underserved areas and populations. It's important to make build-out requirements effective. And secondary license provisions to enable flexible deployment models are important to consider, as well as sharing of passive infrastructure and other policies that lower the cost of infrastructure rights-of-way access. And finally, we're very much in favor of reducing burdensome and unnecessarily complex regulation and adopting a flexible model of partial deregulation for the telecom sector.
Very, very ambitious thoughts there. And one thing I'll take away from this is that ultimately, whatever we do as various stakeholders, we have to ultimately address the barriers to connectivity. And that's where, ultimately people get the true benefit of what all connectivity has to offer. So as an organization, you are the one who drive a prolific growth in content. So from your perspective, what do you think is one game changer that will drive the future of consumer demand on 5G networks? And what should regulators be cognizant of while developing these policies?
Well, some of you likely know Facebook recently changed its name to Meta to reflect that in the next 5 to 10 years, we believe that the metaverse will enable the next generation of online social experiences, more engaging and immersive than we ever thought imaginable before. And this won't be built by Meta alone, but it's ushering in a new chapter for our company, and we're excited to be part of this journey. And we think of the metaverse as a set of digital spaces, including 3D experiences that are all interconnected, so you can easily move between them. It'll let you do things you couldn't do in the physical world with people you can't physically be with. So it'll feel like a hybrid of today's online social experiences expanded beyond 2 dimensions. So you'll be able to hang out with friends, work. I actually recently did a work meeting in Metaverse. It was very interesting. Play, learn, shop, create, and more. And you'll be able to access these spaces across your devices: augmented reality, virtual reality, PC, a smart display, and mobile. Actually, I should say I did that meeting in virtual reality. It's very cool. And the metaverse is the next evolution in social technology and the successor to the mobile internet. And technology allowed us to write, then talk, and now see each other. And the metaverse will be the next step, letting us feel like we're sharing a space together. And this last decade saw a shift from desktop web to mobile internet. And the next decade will be about shifting into this metaverse. We launched a 2-year, $50 million investment in research and programs to build the metaverse responsibly. And the initial work will focus on key policy questions like privacy, economic opportunity, safety and integrity, and equity and inclusion. We plan to hold a series of roundtables and consultations, including discussions exploring specific policy questions that the metaverse will raise. And this is the beginning of a long-term approach to working with and learning from others to deliver the benefits of the metaverse while avoiding many of the challenges we face with today's internet. To do this well, protections have to be built in from the beginning and not retrofitted afterwards. And that's where Meta is going to start. And we're, as we approach this work, we're focused on a few key areas that raise hard questions without any easy answers. And these areas are critical to get right if we want to realize the potential benefits of the metaverse while acknowledging and learning from existing challenges. So we'll start by focusing on these 4 areas. Economic opportunity. How can we give people more choice and encourage competition and maintain a thriving digital economy? Privacy. How can we minimize the amount of data collected and used, build technology to enable privacy protective data uses, and give people transparency and control over their data? Third, safety and integrity. How can we keep people safe online and give them tools to take action or get help if they see something they're not comfortable with? And finally, equity and inclusion. How can we make sure these technologies are designed inclusively and in a way that's accessible? So we're focused on these areas, and I'm excited to work. We're excited to work with all of you on the steps forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Very interesting thoughts there. So I'll move to Anjali. So Anjali, Janet spoke on some of the key aspects around policies and regulations that need attention and revision. What are your thoughts on it from an Indian context specifically?
Thank you, Rahul. Janet laid down the framework, I think, of the future reforms 2.0. First, I would like to say that the government reforms package warmly welcomed by all of us, and I think it'll definitely kickstart the investments for the next generation of technologies. But briefly now, looking to build upon what has already been given by the government and moving forward, what do we see as next steps that would be required to meet the spirit and objective with which these reforms were announced? I would like to adopt the same framework that was used in the telecom reforms package of structural, procedural, liquidity. Under structural, government has already come out with a whole range of spectrum-related reforms, longer tenure, surrender of spectrum, no SUC. The TRAI has recently just issued a consultation for the next round of auctions. The auction design and conditions now have to be such that will facilitate the reform process, talking about adequate, appropriate, and affordable spectrum. Janet has touched upon the need for mid-band spectrum, reasonable reserve prices. Those are all very important to make sure that we have the right spectrum mix at affordable rates so that we can invest in our networks. Conducive payment terms, no upfront payment, looking at longer moratorium and payment over the balance tenure that is now 30 years, lower interest rates. So these are some of the things which we believe will lead to a successful auction design and greater take-up. On procedural, ease of doing business is a key commitment of the government. I believe Industry 4.0 needs practical regulations for telecom that recognize the needs of industry verticals and business models, and the importance of facilitating and enabling such solutions. On liquidity, the key stakeholders for financial health are the government, the investors, and the banking sector. The government has already given a clear signal by announcing the reforms package. The industry and the investors will surely do their part and step up so that we can take the leap to the next generation of technologies. The banking sector too needs to play a key role in supporting these objectives. We believe that banks should start lending more to the telecom sector. And as a first step, perhaps the return of the bank guarantees that has been directed by the government should in fact be recycled back as fresh loans to the industry. The relaxation in the RBI guidelines on enhancing credit for large borrowers. There is an RBI provision that 40% of any incremental borrowing needs to be raised from outside the banking system, we suggest that this may be relaxed or waived for the telecom sector for the next 4 years. So quickly, about 3 quick steps that in the same structure that the government has announced, I believe will take us forward.
We should have had bankers also here to hear your thoughts. But anyways, from a setup of use cases, government is trying to, with the initiatives from Department of Telecom, they've tried to have the 5G hackathon and continuously trying to identify low-cost use cases for India. Because it's not about the network; it's ultimately about the applications and how they ultimately impact people. So, from the various use cases that were kind of shortlisted, I believe work is going on some of them. So, what do you believe are the key measures that the government should do further to ensure seamless application of 5G networks across various domains?
Again, Rahul, I will break it up into 3 different heads. One is, of course, address the infrastructure challenge. Spectrum, I've already spoken about. Right-of-way challenges, Jeanette has highlighted. That is very, very important going forward. High-capacity backhaul. We have adequate access spectrum. Backhaul can turn out to be a bottleneck in case we don't get enough of it allocated to support the increase in traffic. I would also like the cross-functional challenges should be addressed. The 5G use cases are going to be across domains, across industries. A future fit framework requires that the framework should facilitate and enable and not obstruct and inhibit. We will need to look at the rules and regulations to ensure that the business models and solutions that come forward in the 5G use cases are allowed to flourish in a conducive environment. Privacy and data protection, Monica has mentioned that. That is very important as we turn into a data-based economy. In this, 2 points. One is need for balance. You have to balance privacy and data protection with the need to fuel innovation. Somewhere the personal data protection framework and the non-personal data protection framework need to recognize and work together and pull in the same direction. The other point which I would like to highlight is level playing field. We are all for less regulation, and we believe that everybody should be allowed to flourish and grow. But same service, same rules would be the need of the hour if the entire digital ecosystem has to flourish together.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, thank you, Anjali. I'll move on to Vishakha now. So, Vishakha, we heard Anjali speak her views. So, from your perspective, in terms of a very large operator in India, so from a regulatory and policy standpoint, what do you believe are the key interventions that are needed to drive the next wave of digital enhancement?
Sure, Rahul. Thank you so much. Uh, Given the importance of the sector and the fact that it's emerged as a crucial enabler for socio-economic growth in the country, it's very important to have a conducive and facilitative policy environment. And in this regard, like you've mentioned and other colleagues have mentioned, government from time to time has taken the right measures in line with the technology evolution and shifts. The recent telecom reforms are a step in the right direction, and as an industry, we laud the government for same. However, in order to meet the exponentially growing demand for digital services and to catalyze further investments in expanding communication infrastructure across the country, from a policy and regulatory standpoint, we need to address certain very critical issues. First and foremost, as talked by Jeanette and other members, it's very important to have a predictable, fair, transparent policy framework for spectrum management and allocation. So this is a prerequisite for meeting the growing capacity and coverage needs, and is particularly very important for ensuring success of 5G in India. In fact, all the new and emerging technologies, be it IoT, be it Industry 4.0 or smart healthcare, they depend on adequate capacity and coverage of digital connectivity, for which availability of sufficient and reasonably priced spectrum is a must. We need to align to international benchmarks and practices, both in terms of spectrum prices as well as earmarking globally recognized spectrum bands for 5G services. And needless to say, to ensure optimum utilization of spectrum, and also from the point of view of network planning, it becomes very critical that we simultaneously auction all 5G bands. Any piecemeal approach with regards to spectrum allocation will bring in network inefficiencies and will significantly increase the overall cost of 5G. Additionally, looking at the massive surge in network traffic, it becomes very vital that adequate backhaul spectrum is made available to TSPs on priority. Any further delay in releasing more backhaul carriers will not only adversely impact the quality of service, but also delay transition to 5G. Both A and B bands are extremely valuable and very crucial for high capacity backhaul and for providing 5G services. And they need to be allocated on an immediate basis through a fair and transparent auction based process. Any other method for allocation of these bands, or for that matter, any other spectrum, would be detrimental not only from a level playing field perspective, but also would result in suboptimal utilization of spectrum and technical issues around interference. Another pressing and long-standing need of the industry is around reducing the burden of regulatory levies and taxes on TSPs, especially with regards to license fee and the GST levels, which are very high and not in line with international benchmarks. Easing this burden will actually enable TSPs to channelize and catalyze their investments towards the much needed network expansion and enhancement. Uh, Fixed line broadband services. This is one area which needs an urgent policy push from the government. As a country, we fare very low in terms of proliferation of wireline services. And if we to really improve penetration levels and meet the desired target of enabling fixed line broadband for, say, at least 50% of the households in India, as envisaged in NDCP, it becomes very important that government provides incentive to the operators and TSPs in form of license fee exemption and legally enforceable ROW rules. Lastly, Rahul, I'll just say that as TSPs, we've made huge investments in building digital infrastructure in the country. And given the ever increasing demand for data services, we would be required to make additional investments in expanding the infrastructure on a continual basis. Considering this, it becomes very important to safeguard the investments made by TSPs and to ensure that there's a level playing field with regards to competing and substitutable services being offered by OTT and satellite communication providers. We're absolutely and completely open to more players entering the sector and new technologies like satellite communication. However, the only submission is that TSPs should also be enabled to compete on an equal footing with other players vis-a-vis licensing and regulatory frameworks or payment obligations. So like Anjali said, the principle of same service, same rules need to be adopted, in the true sense for sustained growth of the sector in the long run. Thank you.
I heard you speak. In fact, I was about to come to that when Anjali did mention same service, same rules, and at the end you mentioned satellite in the same sentence. So a couple of things here, because while we have made great strides towards rural connectivity, but it's still understood that satellite still offers a significant advantage in terms of connecting rural points where laying the fiber is definitely not cost effective, and getting a satellite transmission in place would be probably much cheaper. But from having said that, so with the recent focus, and we have just heard the government of India stopping SpaceX from taking any new connections in India. So with the focus on satellite-based connectivity, what do you believe should be the licensing framework, or how should it be put in place to make sure that we have a satellite and we have a competitive satellite-based ecosystem in India as well?
Rahul, like I said, we absolutely welcome and are open to exploring the potential of satellite technology for offering communication services. Only requested that it shouldn't be done at the cost of existing terrestrial networks or the ecosystem of 4G and 5G networks, which are globally accepted. It is crucial to ensure that there is parity in terms of policies and regulatory framework between all service providers providing same service irrespective of technology or the mode of delivery. It's very evident that satellite technologies are going to coexist, complement, and even compete with terrestrial services, both technically and commercially. And if you look at the spectrum space, both 5G and space-based communication technologies are now developed in the same spectrum space, that is millimeter waves, including 26 gigahertz, 28 gigahertz, 40 gigahertz. So going forward, both are going to compete for the right to use the same spectrum. That is why auction-derived market price-based mechanism should remain the only mode for obtaining the right to use spectrum for communication services. And the licensing framework for satellite communication should be explored only under the ambit of a unified license to avoid any regulatory asymmetries or imbalances in the sector. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. So I'll move to Tarun here. So Tarun, with we heard Vishakha, we heard Anjali speak. So from your perspective, with urban areas and rural areas showing a huge appetite for data communications, and what do you believe are the key reforms to be put in place to make sure that the telecom connectivity specifically is enhanced in the remote and underserved regions of India?
Thanks, Rahul. There is no doubt that the rural India needs the broadband to enjoy the benefits of the digital India, whether it is online education or healthcare. So I think the last 2 years the government has done a lot. For example, the USO, they have come out with the various USO tenders to cover the approximately more than 7,000 villages where they have granted the USO subsidy. Recently, the cabinet has approved another USO project for putting the sites in more than 7,000 uncovered villages. So from the government side, they are doing a lot of things. The government is also working on the new space com policy, which will definitely allow the the LEO satellite services in the country. So wherever the terrestrial network is not being able to reach, the satellite services can be provided. So and it's not that the ruler doesn't need the broadbands. Our, we are covering approximately more than 1,200, the villages through the USO subsidy. And our experience in the Northeast shows that the moment we put up the site, the traffic was amazing. So yeah, I think it opened our eyes also. But definitely a lot can be done. So the financial viability of the rural area is definitely a key challenge. Can the government do more? The answer is yes. Whether it is a rationalization of the regulatory levies, whether it is allowing the access of the free right of way, or the the government buildings. So there are many things which the government can do that, and I'm sure that they should do that so that everybody is connected and they can enjoy the benefits of the digital India.
So a quick follow-up question to you, Tarun. So this is something that Jeanette spoke around the key expectations around 5G bands pricing, and same sentiments were echoed by Anjali also, and Vishakha also spoke about it. So what are your views on it in terms of availability, pricing, standards?
I think one thing definitely I must congratulate the government for the recent reforms. I think they have clearly set the tone for the next reforms, whether it is related to the spectrum, whether it is increasing the validity of the the spectrum, whether it is a provision of surrendering the spectrum, whether they have announced that whether there should not be any SUC for the future auctions. I think there could be three fundamental things which we are expecting for the government and the TRI to do that. One, I think the operator in the upcoming auctions, all the bands should be auctions. So whether it is a lower band, whether it is a mid band and high band, because it is very essential so that we can meet the requirement of all the use cases. For example, sub-gigahertz bands are essential for coverage, mid bands are required to build capacity in the network, and higher bands are required for smaller areas where extremely high bandwidth is required. So I think auction of the all bands together will be critical for the success of the 5G services. Second, there is always a long pending demand of the rationalization of the the reserve price. The industry has been requesting both the government and the TRI to come out with a rational reserve price, and it's not something which is only the request from the Indian operators. I've just seen the examples of the Brazil where the reserve price of 5G spectrum was only 2 crores. The Hong Kong, it was again 2 crores. In Portugal, it's only 1 crore per megahertz. So I think the industry expect a reasonable reserve price, which allows the operators to acquire the spectrums, but also have the flexibility to make a lot of investments in the network. Third is definitely, which would be critical, is the globally harmonized standards. I think India has been hugely benefited with the globally harmonized, whether it's a handsets or the equipments, because the kind of economies of scale the equipments have been brought. I think that has basically played a significant role in the success of the telecom services in India. So I
Absolutely.
think our expectations would be from the government that any policy with regard to the standards, it should always allow the globally harmonized bands. That's all. Thank you.
So I'm sure you have the policymakers and the regulators listening intently to your demands. And obviously, before you get to them, I'll go to Amit. And so, because Amit, your organization has been a provider to all the leading telecom operators in India and obviously around the globe as well. And obviously, you see India as you've been in India from very, very long time now. So you see India at the cusp of a digital revolution. So how do you see the policy landscape of India evolving from your perspective?
Thank you, Rahul. Firstly, I would like to say that this entire last 2 years has, I think, made us realize how digitalization is important. And actually, the only good thing about COVID is that it has given an acceleration to digitalization of the world across the sector. I think this is one and only good thing that has happened today. If you see, our offices, schools, shopping, entertainment, healthcare, everything has been managed remotely, and it's thanks to the telecom networks and the warriors across the world who have been managing these networks. Having said that, I'll just come to India and I'll give you a perspective. India is a little unique. India is unique from the perspective of how India consumes data and what India has done in the past. So in the last 5 years, if you see the record, we have almost grown our data consumption by 60 times. It is unprecedented. Even if you look at China as an example, India has far, so what we have been able today, an average Indian consumes about 15 GB per month, that too on a 4G network and partly on 2G and 3G. We are seeing Indians consuming almost 4.5 to 5 hours on their smartphones today. So the appetite for consumption is extremely high. And like I said, the digitalization has accelerated things. I mean, what we see today, UPI as an example, or even the CoWIN app as an example with 1.2 crores Indians already getting vaccinated in a short period of time. It has proven how digitalization has already reaped benefit, especially for a market like India. Having said that, I think we are sitting in another cusp of revolution where 5G and the future will take us leapfrog. It's a revolution. It's not an evolution of technology. And why I say that is because it's going to affect not only our connectivity through our phones or our laptops or our voice connectivity. It is going much beyond that. It is going to touch every part of our lives. We often say in Nokia that technology to help the world to act together. That's our new actually purpose of what we have defined as a company. And I think that makes a lot of sense. We are going to, in the future, help the world to act together to have a better life. And I think that's where we are. Coming to the question about the policy, I think a lot has been said. I don't want to be repetitive because everybody has said the reforms, the relief package, all the things that have been done are extremely welcome moves. I think what we have done in addition in accelerating what, beyond the reforms are schemes such as, the Make in India scheme, Digital India scheme, the PLI scheme, which has been implemented recently for telecom. Extremely positive steps. I think 5G trials, which are ongoing right now, and I can tell you we are doing trials with all the CSPs. Use cases that are being tested and tried across the board. Startups are being encouraged to come and do trials and test out new technologies. So all in all, everything is working to the right direction. I would only say we need to keep this momentum going. So the key is going to be implementation of the policies that have already been rolled. Very important, like everybody has already said, going in future in 5G right of way, extremely important. Backhaul, having a robust backhaul, yes, fiber is going to be extremely critical, but beyond fiber, can we use 5G as a backhaul? Can we use the ENV band? Can we open that for a backhaul? I think those are more, future critical things that are going to be very, very relevant for us to take a leapfrog into making India a better digital transformed economy.
Absolutely. From the changes that the government has done recently to strengthen the sector, so how do you see the industry responding, including OEMs like yourself and the telecom service providers as well?
Yeah, so I think everybody has said that the reforms is a great step. I would give you some perspective of what affects us. For instance, the production linked incentive scheme. We are already a manufacturer in India. I think we have taken part in this scheme, and we are expanding our manufacturing, adding new products, adding new technologies, doing more in India. And I would say, in fact, we have a meeting with the secretary tomorrow. But around that, one of our requests is that the multiplier from incentive to what we are able to generate in terms of additional revenue by producing and selling more in India, that needs the multiplier is 20 times, and we are saying that's not enough. Let's make it 40 times, because that's the kind of impact that we are already seeing from some of these schemes coming. So I think things are in the positive momentum. PLI scheme, like I mentioned. The other, I think, what still needs to be watched and what is very critical, and the secretary is here from TRAI. He will talk about it: 5G spectrum. When, how, what, how much is going to be extremely critical, because that is now the next big thing. When is going to 5G? Will India be left behind? We are still at par with the world, I would think. But getting the 5G right in India from a spectrum perspective, from a technology perspective, from a policy perspective, from right-of-way perspective, is, I think, extremely critical for the next revolution in India to happen.
Absolutely. So thank you, Amit. I'll move to Mr. Raghunandan here. Sir, we heard everyone speak here. So from your perspective, what are the kind of policy interventions that are required to bolster connectivity, and not only connectivity beyond broadband as well? What would be your views on it? Sir, you're on mute probably.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Rahul. Thanks all of you for giving your thoughts, and maybe most of you are directing the questions at me. So what I heard from there. So let me just see what I can tell you about holistically. Actually, in TRAI, we always look at not piecemeal anything. If anything, recommendation. If you see that most of our recommendations are all very holistic, not that particular piece of recommendation which was sought. So we will see the whole ecosystem in between how to backward connectivity and forward connectivity, the whole linkages. That is how our approach has been. And as far as the policy is concerned for broadband, as far as broadband is concerned, my colleague Mr. Ranjan also knows, and we have already recommended earlier for the fixed line broadband. My distinguished panelist has touched about, some of the panelists have touched about fixed line broadband. We have recently given a recommendation again in connection with the fixed line broadband, some incentive-based fixed line broadband penetration, provided you meet certain targets. It was linked up with the certain targets in the rural as well as in the urban. So that means actually we are, even if you see the ITU and whole ITU's G5 framework for the regulators, etc., collaborative regulation, etc. So there also they say that incentive-based and collaborative regulation. These two are the main focus: innovation, incentives, and the collaboration. These three. So TRAI also is looking at in those aspects in future. And then one is that incentive-based. We have recommended that instead of recommending, in fact, earlier we have recommended straight into that AGR exemption can be given for the fixed line broadband penetration. But now we have given incentive-based with certain targets. So that is one thing. And also we have given ROW policy, how we have to actually all India single, we have recommended that it should be developed by the single, from the single source. I've seen even today we were reviewing Sikkim, etc., for the ROW implementation. Then again, there is a difficulty actually. If we streamline and then make a uniform ROW portal, that will be of great help. And we have recommended that in our, that will help actually for the faster 5G, especially you require a number of approvals, etc. So in line with that, actually, this will be of more great help. If you see that, that is also recommended by us. And my colleagues were all talking about ENB band. We have way back, from 5-6 years back, we have already recommended on ENB bands, what way it has to be allocated, etc. If at all, of course, I have nothing to say at this stage now. If it comes back to us, we will see. Otherwise, we have already recommended. One thing which I am very clear is that all of you feel that is the E-band or whatever the backhaul is very critical for 5G. Without backhaul, 5G proliferation will be certainly difficult. That I agree with all of you. So as far as the fixed line broadband, we have already given recommendations. And also, the future challenge will be definitely, my colleagues are all so much worried about terrestrial and then satellite. The future has to be with a coexistence. One cannot say that, okay, I will live on terrestrial or I will live on satellite. The reality is that we need to move forward and then coexist together. How best we need to coexist, and then what are all the studies done and what way we need to move forward. I'm not talking as a regulator on this issue. As a regulator, whatever we need to do, we will definitely do that. But the coexistence is the only way. That is, the coexistence is the only way. And my colleagues were talking here about the mechanisms and the models, etc. What is the allocation, etc. We will see that what best can be done on this issue, what way we need to move forward. As far as the 5G spectrum, etc. is concerned, it is not proper on my part to talk anything on this at this stage, because we have given our consultation paper is out. The responsibility is on all of you now to give the inputs on this. The number of questions which we have, you might, if you just go through, none of you have even so far gone through even 70 plus questions we have given. The exhaustive. The day and night we have spent on this, each and every question. The detailed inputs, global inputs are required, not only from India. The Jeanette can give, and then all across the globe, they need to give. The responsibility is in your hands. So instead of, you need to give those responsibilities, these inputs for us for appropriate consideration. So that is all I can say at this stage. So please do not wait till 30th of December and then ask for an extension. That is what again I am telling you. The timelines, all of you want urgently. Everybody wants urgently the 5G spectrum pricing, etc. We have we wanted to actually sharp 30th November. We have released the consultation. If you see that within 1 month of almost 1 month of getting the final details from DOT, this is the fastest consultation paper which we have issued in the history of TRAI. I must say that. So we have worked on that. So it is all of your responsibility to give us the inputs, right inputs in the right time. So then we can work on that and see that the timelines can be met, and India can see the whatever fashion you wanted to roll out the 5G, etc. So it's all responsibilities on you. So I would request all of you to respond at the earliest. That is about the 5G. Then about collaborative regulation, I would like to say something on this. We are trying to, because in TRAI, actually what we are trying to do is not only recommendations giving, now another step now. Most, as I touched about the ITU 5G collaborative regulation process, there we are trying to collaborate with other regulators like electricity regulator and all other regulators, for example. So how best we can actually in the infrastructure sharing and infrastructure utilization, and then we are working on those models. So we have in the FOIR, there is a forum for Indian regulators. So there we are discussing with all other regulators. We have initiated, we have set up a joint committees. I'm telling you, these are all the initiatives we have taken in last few months time. And then we are moving forward to see that how best we can facilitate. Because there are n number of states and I must say provinces in India. So we are trying to work with them, those regulatory, regulators also. So through our field units and through various mechanisms. My colleague, Mr. Ranjan, also will be actually he was working with with the states for the ROW policies. So we are also actually parallelly working with our. We are trying to work and then bring out certain frameworks which can help for the recommendations to be actually how we can further take it forward. So as part of that, we have actually recommended ROW Council like to be set up at national level. So that can help streamline the whole processes. That I think it is under consideration with the DOT. We have discussed with the DOT also, with the government, various sources. So I think that will all help, and then common tax policy, how to move about. We had initiated actually, maybe Mr. Amit has joined or not, I don't know. Today we had another set of meetings with NHA. We are actually trying to come along with Gati Shakti. Maybe Mr. Hariranjan also can share that. As part of Gati Shakti, the all national highways, etc., how to do a common act for the sharing purpose. That we are working on that. Those frameworks we are working on with them. So these are all the major policy initiatives and then the steps taken by TRI. Now we are into that. So this is about holistically I wanted to say. If you have any more specific questions, actually, if you see that already sharing policies, we have been encouraging the sharing policies. Anytime, whether it is active sharing, that is a passive sharing, or enhanced scope of IPs for the active sharing. These are all things which we are in and in about the sharing of the policies, which can bring down the costs. So that is very clear. And then technology neutral with respect to spectrum. It has been the whole the philosophy of whether it is a TRAI or DOT. It has been the hallmark of that. So this is all in that direction. But with respect to spectrum, but about the technology neutrality, about what you are intending to say, I do not know. So I am confining myself about the spectrum usage for the technology. The remaining things, okay, we'll see that. So this is about our current approach. If you have specifics, again, I can talk about that.
So sir, with that statement, what you did was you essentially put the ball in the operator's court. So Vishakha, Anjali, and Tarun, you have a deadline to meet now, and you can't say, we'll seek an extension now. So very, very clearly articulated here. So thank you, sir. So for 5G specifically, while you asked for a consultation paper, and I've gone through some sections of it because we also intend to respond to that. So from a 5G specific perspective, what are the measures that you would be suggesting to ensure a success of the overall 5G rollout?
No, 5G rollout, that's what I have already enumerated. One key thing is that to collaborate with the regulator, because you need a number of ROW permissions and then the collaboration with the other regulators. Because underground laying, etc., you have challenges. So this definitely you may have to go with the overhead. And recently DOT also has issued some guidelines on that overhead utilization. We are further going. Not only that, and then we are trying to see wherever there is an issue of pricing because how the others are charging. So those things are also we are trying to get into, and then we are trying to resolve those things. So this is what, in essence, I wanted to say, because collaboration is going to be the very important aspect. Many of the countries globally, they have moved to a collaborative regulation. We are also moving in that direction.
Thank you, sir. So I'll come back to you, sir, once again. So now I'll move to Hari, sir. So Hari, sir, sorry to keep you waiting for so long, but then from you run a lot of policy initiatives, anyways, from the overall perspective of the sector as well, and through some of the initiatives under NDCP, while the government has initiated a lot of missions on national broadband to enhance broadband and rural connectivity. So what are the other similar policies that the government can kind of undertake to ensure other technologies are given the due importance, things like cloud, IoT. Somebody talked about Industry 4.0 also, and then data analytics in order to enhance and accelerate India's digital spread.
Thank you, Rahul. See, first of all, the topic itself is policy as an enabler for digital connectivity to thrive in India. So let's understand from thriving perspective, I think there are three major parameters which we need to work together. One is, of course, the financial autonomy of the service providers in the sector. They have enough money to invest in the sector and will be able to grow. Second is the entire sustainability of the operations. If it is ab initio unviable, then thriving is ruled out. And the third issue is availability of resources. It could be spectrum, it could be right of way, it could be in fact equipment, whether you have in India sufficient amount of equipment to be able to supply the way we want to grow. On these issues, on the issue of financial autonomy, government's intent is now clear, because the recent reforms are the best, as I say, proof of the pudding is in eating. So providing liquidity to the companies was the first step to explain that yes, we want the companies to have financial autonomy. Start spending now, start planning now for expansion of your networks. On the issue of sustainability, I think lesser I said the better. It is for the industry to take a call. Some steps have been taken in the recent past by trying to improve the ARPU, and but I think that's work in progress. And again, I think industry is in the best position to judge that, because they are in a marketplace, and these things have to be decided by the market. Third issue is availability of resources. So on the spectrum, I think Raghunandan sir has said what he had to say, and everybody is so enamored with 5G spectrum and all that. I will keep myself away from that, and I'll rather focus on topics which everybody touched upon, but I'll deep dive into the subject because that is something which I am handling on a day-to-day basis. This is regarding the policy interventions that now government planning and needs to do in terms of looking into the acts, looking into the rules and regulations. Do we need to fundamentally even change them? Some effort has begun on that direction. You are all aware about it. We are consulting with all the stakeholders. What kind of changes they will need to bring in the act? What Indian Telegraph Act 1885, as the name suggests, is that way quite robust because it has stood the test of time for more than 100 years. Having said that, maybe time to look into it, whether we can add some features which will be in time with the current demand. Secondly, simplified processes. Well, recent reforms again have started touching into the subject by allowing self-certification for SAKFA and all that. But I think a lot more needs to be done, and collectively we will do it. Government is determined. As a person handling policy in government, I can assure you that that is what we are looking forward to, so that your operations become simpler and you can again devote your energy and time more on thriving in India and expanding your footprints in India and providing more services in India rather than coming to the government for regulation purposes. Having said that, biggest bottleneck has been right of way, and it will become even more so in the days to come when you go for 5G, where you will have larger concentration of towers and small cells and all that. So one beginning was made to come up with ROW rules 2016, where we said these are the rates, this is how it has to be done, and most of the states have started bringing their policies out. But as they say, there is a gap between the lip and the cup. So in many of the states, still the policy has been out, but people who need to implement that policy need to still understand the spirit behind those rules and those policies. So that is again a work in progress. Now here I want all of the panel members to understand that you see India has a very peculiar problem or challenge, I would say, is that telecom is a central subject, whereas the action lies on the ground, which is in the states and the cities and the villages. And we have a system where we have a central list, you have union list, you have a state list, you have a concurrent list, and you also have schedules in the constitution where you have powers for the urban local bodies and rural local bodies. You cannot ignore the authority of the local bodies. You cannot let telecom expand on its own without taking these stakeholders into confidence. So time has now come to deep dive into that level of micro planning and policy enabling. Now, how do we go about it? You see, one small issue that when we started discussing with all the state governments, many states said that for ROW permissions, we are having our own centralized online portal. Many smaller states said, why don't you do it in DOT? We will simply join your bandwagon. So the good news is our ROW portal is ready. Few states have already come on board. They are doing the beta testing. Integration with existing state level portals through APIs is being done so that there is a common dashboard available. Going forward, idea is that if one company wants to apply for ROW, it should be able to do a single sign-on. You just log in at one portal and also apply in Maharashtra and in Nagaland and in Bihar and so on. So it's a good thought. Sometimes appears utopian, but not very difficult. Technologically, we all know it is possible. Only thing is, every player in the system has to agree to come on board together. But where we still need to work together is in terms of creating awareness and education of the policy makers at the state level, city level. You see, unless and until we are able to generate that curiosity in the mayor of a city, that I will be the best city in the country where 5G rollout is the fastest. Till that ownership comes, you will keep struggling to get permission to install your small cells on street furniture and taking permissions. It has to be just reversed. The game should be that let the cities, let the states invite telecom infra companies to invest in their cities so that they become the leaders. Now, that can happen when we develop coherently a unified strategy for bringing them on board, explain to them the stakes that are available here in case of the rollout of 5G, how it will benefit the GDP growth of the state and the city and so on. So what TRAI Secretary was talking about, collaboration. Well, if you don't talk about telecom as a subject also, we know that there are mayors in the world who go out road showing about their city, how it is very good for investment promotion. So why not cities mayor go out and telling that our city is the best connected in terms of telecom infrastructure? Well, that kind of ownership needs to come. So in my view, one of the policy area where as an enabler we need to bring this down is at this level. Thirdly, changes at the law, changes at the rules, changes in the bylaws to let all this happen. Street furnitures. I think urban bylaws of the local governments in the states, we need to get them amended. So again, it's not very easy. India is a federal country with 36 states and union territories. So we need to now work in that direction, and that is what we are all collectively trying to do in the National Broadband Mission and at the government level. And lastly, I want to say about inclusive development. You see, in India, there is a Bharat, there is an India. Till we reach out to each and every citizen in the country with the same level of facility, I think the entire digital connectivity's drive is not going to be achieved. The dream will not be fulfilled. So one of the smaller roles that we in government are playing is through USOF, which of course Tarunji mentioned about in his talk, that all the unreached areas, all the difficult terrains, all the unviable areas, we are now trying to bring in players through USOF funding, through viability gap funding, etc. So the good thing is government has also now decided that we'll bring in private players in all these schemes also. So in BharatNet now we are talking about public-private partnership, asking the private players to take over the network. In case of mobile connectivity, the model is even better. We are asking the existing service providers to extend their tower network into unreachable areas and take VGF from us. So it's a seamless extension of the network. I guess this kind of proactive intervention by the government to try to bridge the gap will go a very long way in terms of digital inclusivity in India, which is very, very critical and important. And lastly, I want to say only one word about manufacturing prowess in India, which of course Amit Marwah mentioned about PLI scheme. So the idea is that we are a humongous country in terms of population and demand. So I think the time has come now also to develop ecosystem for infrastructure creation, ecosystem for manufacturing of the infrastructure that is needed in the country. PLI is one step in the right direction. I guess these kind of policy enabling steps should in a long way be able to help India reach and fulfill its dream. Thank you.
Right, sir. So thank you very much. Very, very consistent thoughts all across, and I'm sure they'll resonate with the people. Just one last thing, because ultimately connectivity is a medium, and with the medium, the ultimate growth is ultimately driven by organizations which utilize connectivity. And in that regard, so how do you believe that we should have enabling policies to promote startups? You talked about manufacturing, but obviously that could be large scale. But should there be enabling policies to make sure that there are other startups who can ultimately drive the growth and development in India?
Yes, so in the startup ecosystem in telecom, we have a very small scheme currently, which is called Champion Services Sector Scheme, which is encouraging startup in a small way. But there is a TRAI recommendation to also have a technology development board where government can set up a larger corpus. And I guess we are working on those TRAI recommendations. And I guess it will certainly be a step forward. Although India's startup ecosystem has already reached a level of maturity where it's only a matter of time when startups also start coming into telecom sector. But having said that, government is also going to play a role proactively.
Absolutely. While we are coming to the end of our session, I think wonderful thoughts. If I may summarize, we talked about, starting from the beginning and addressing barriers to connectivity and various measures of how that would happen. We talked about spectrum, availability of spectrum at the right price, the right mix, and the right bands. And also, we touched upon the coexistence of satellites along with other technologies of how that would be an overall enabler and a game changer. We talked about same service, same rules. And we talked about manufacturing. We talked about how rural ecosystems are driving demand. And then, sir, lastly, you talked about very important aspects in terms of financial autonomy, in terms of sustainability and viability for operators. That's very important, and also making sure that the availability of right resources are there on time, and also making sure that we have an ecosystem for manufacturing. Also talked about ROW. So in the end, so what I would do is I want to request Raghunandan sir to provide his final concluding remarks.
Thank you again for asking me to provide the concluding. There is nothing called concluding remarks as far as the telecom.
Forward-looking. Let's say it would forward-looking, like forward-looking policies with forward-looking remarks.
I must say that yes, we will be looking forward, definitely forward-looking policies. And I just wanted to add that one or two more steps about the ease of doing business. We will be shortly coming out with a detailed consultation paper. So that is also there because for both broadcasting and telecom sectors whole, we are coming out with so it will cover whole processes involved in both the departments. So that will try to help you actually in simplifying and then ease of doing business, and then people, even a small startup or anybody applying anywhere with the timelines, etc. All those things we are trying to, another 2-3 days, few days, it is likely to come. That I just wanted to share with that. And so this, point here is that we will be, our approach, as I told you, forward-looking policies, not only the now coming out with the policies as Mr. Ranjan now has told. As I mentioned again, the challenges in India are actually enormous, and then we need to work collaboratively. Collaborative approach is the right thing. So this is why I touched upon. When I joined actually from there, DOT International Relations, I came back here. The ITU collaborative regulation model G5 is the one thing which I studied in depth. I found that the collaboration we have to not only with the other regulators, other agencies, etc. Because especially in the 5G and the future, 5G and beyond, we now start talking about 5G and beyond and 6G, etc. And also we are talking about the not only about the terrestrial and then the convergence. Now convergence is another way forward. Say whether again you accept or not, convergence is going to be the reality. We are also working on. Mr. Ranjan has already told about the looking into the 1885 Act and other things. So we are also looking into about the convergence and laws. These also we are looking into that because convergence is one way forward. One way forward. Then all these things will try to converge. Your ideas, your thoughts, your everything will converge. So this is what actually I wanted to say, and I once again thank, and I'll be looking forward for your inputs on December 28th. I think so that is one question which you have asked me, which we are looking forward. I thank all the panelists for giving their thoughts, actually very forward looking, and my colleague, senior colleague, Mr. Ranjan, he has touched about the startup ecosystem. I must say that we are also working on beyond PLI and beyond whatever champion sector scheme, whatever we have recommended on R&D policies and manufacturing. We are working on these two consultations. Shortly we'll be coming out, and then we'll be giving inputs to DOT to move forward in that. Thank you.
So absolutely wonderful, sir. In fact, I would like to thank all of you personally. Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, Amit, Monica, Vishakha, Anjali, Tarun, and Hari sir, and Raghunandan sir. I personally, if you ask me, I'll personally take away a lot of thoughts and insights from today's session. A lot of things that we discussed, of truly, great relevance, in building this ecosystem for us. Thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
so
very much.
much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all.